Olá, bem-vindos à live mais que especial da ABEAD para finalizar esse mês de sensibilização com relação ao uso de produtos de nicotina, principalmente por jovens, com uma organização que chamou nossa atenção no documentário Big Vape, que tem por aí nas plataformas de streaming, e a gente pensou, nossa, a gente precisa deles aqui com a gente, né? E fazendo uma homenagem à Elaine Camarini, que estaria aqui no meu lugar para fazer a tradução, mas passou, né, fez a passagem, infelizmente. Então, a gente celebra a vida dela e a dedicação dela à ABEAD, e também com um agradecimento à Alessandra Dil, que foi firme e determinada para fazer essa articulação. Sem ela, a gente não teria conseguido essa apresentação maravilhosa que a gente vai ter. Lembrando para vocês, quem não é sócio, se associarem, porque temos várias atividades gratuitas para associados, e networking, e capacitações. Teremos certificado no final, né, por link do perfil da ABEAD, no chat, né, e aí apresentando o PAVe, com a Meredith Berkman. Ela é mãe, cofundadora do PAVe, e ela simplesmente faz parte dessa organização que o resumo é: vocês mexeram com os pais errados. Então, eles se opõem às estratégias da indústria e nada mais produtivo com relação ao tema da OMS trazê-la aqui. Meredith, thank you so much. You can begin your speech.
Obrigado, Carolina. Thank you. Muito grato por estar aqui. I hope that I just said in Portuguese that I am very grateful to be here. I am Meredith Berkman. As Carolina just said, I apologize that I do not speak Portuguese, nor do I speak Espanol, not even poquito. I speak very quickly because I am from New York, so I will try to speak slowly. And again, I really am honored to be asked to be here. I am a co-founder of Parents Against Vaping e-cigarettes, Parents Against Vaping, and my presentation tonight is about how to empower parents to protect youth from vaping. We can go to the first slide, please. So I speak very quickly, but I'm going to attempt to speak slowly. And I'll tell you about our backstory, and I'll tell you about our group. The first is, I'll just read the slide, Parents Against Vaping. We are a national advocacy and education nonprofit powered by parent volunteers who fight youth vaping and nicotine use and the predatory practices of the vaping and tobacco industries. We help sound the alarm about Juul. I believe everyone on this call knows what Juul is and what it was and what it still is, and the youth vaping epidemic. And our parent voices continue to have, we hope, an important impact in public health. We advocate at the local, state, and federal levels in the United States for ending sales of all flavored tobacco products. And what we seek to do is educate parents about the harms of vaping and tobacco use, because we believe that education is perhaps the strongest form of advocacy. I will try to tell you very briefly how, as I said earlier to my amiga Carolina, how I ended up in, quote, this mess. And I have no background in public health, as I know many of you do, and I greatly respect those who do. We have my two partners and I, we are full-time volunteers, which is a nice way of saying we work for free. That is because we wanted to be able to face the tobacco industry and point out that the tobacco industry is motivated by profit, and we are only here to protect children. In April of 2018, my one son, I have 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. My son, who was then 16, came home from school, and he told me and my husband that night at dinner that there had been what he called a, quote, mixed message anti-addiction talk at his new high school. And when the teachers and administrators left the room, which is common for these outside anti-addiction talks, this supposed educator, this adult who was left alone with this assembly of 9th grade teens, talked to the kids about Juul. Now, back in 2018, I must admit, I did not know what Juul was, but every young person in that room either was using Juul or had tried it, was addicted to Juul, or had a friend who was. And as this educator spoke to the teenagers, he told them Juul was not for them. It was for adults, not for kids. But according to my son, he followed up every statement by saying, but Juul is, quote, totally safe. He told them that Juul was, quote, 99.9% safer than traditional combustible cigarettes, and that it would be receiving approval from our FDA, Food and Drug Administration, any day. Now, my son, being a skeptic, went up to this man at the end with 2 other boys. Those were the sons of my co-founders. They were 16, 15, and 14 to ask more questions. And that's when this supposed adult educator took out a Juul, showed these children how it worked, and called it the iPhone of vapes. I can tell you that when my son told me this, I called the 2 other moms I knew in the high school, new school, and I asked if they had heard the same story. They said no. They checked with their sons. They called me back within 5 minutes. They too heard this story. And within 24 hours, we 3 moms discovered, having been a journalist, we discovered that this was in fact a Juul representative that had come into the school without the school's knowledge through the outside anti-addiction group, and that the school had absolutely no idea. And in the days and weeks that followed, you know, we 3 moms were on the phone Googling late at night and talking when all of our kids were asleep. And what we were really horrified to discover was both the predatory nature of this company Juul that we soon learned had been targeting not only our kids, but everyone's kids on social media platforms where they knew that young people were, but adults were not. We were also really horrified to learn that this Juuling, as it was called then, was a very big problem among young people. And so we decided to research. There must be a parent group similar to what in the United States we had seen when I was young. It was called MAD. That stood for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And that was a grassroots group that fought against drunk driving and helped change laws. But there was no group like that yet about Juul. And as I like to joke, I don't know if it will make sense in English, but we are the, quote, necessary idiots, as they say, who created the group that frankly we would have preferred probably to join. We could go to the next slide. I hope, and please let me know, Carol knows if I'm speaking too quickly, please someone jump in and tell me. I will not be offended. What we quickly learned was that it was really important to help change the laws. These were new products. You may hear my doorbell, for which I apologize. I work at home and I have 4 children, as I said. We realized that we had to sound the alarm about this problem that most adults did not yet know about. And that we would also have to help change the laws. And as I said earlier, our goal is to educate parents about the dangers of youth vaping and tobacco use, to empower them to educate others in their own communities, and to fight for legislation and regulation that targets the flavors. Now, I know in Brazil, you have been very much ahead of the curve for many years, and you have very tough regulations. I believe you are ahead of the United States in that you have no flavored cigarettes, including menthol cigarettes, something that has still not been done here. And that's fantastic. But we still, our FDA, which is our regulatory body, I believe and I don't know the acronym. Carol, you'll have to fill me in. It's ANIVA or ANISA. I apologize for not knowing, but we still do not have these new products fully regulated. Any product, any e-cigarette, flavored e-cigarette that came on the market from 2016 on, if a flavored product is on the market here in America, it is not fully regulated because the FDA, our FDA, has so far only authorized 23 e-cigarettes, none of which are flavored. Yet the market is full of illegal flavored vapes. And as I know, you know, in Brazil, flavors hook kids. I mean, that is not new news. That's why in Brazil and here in the United States in 2009, when our federal government under the Obama administration got rid of flavored cigarettes, they made the mistake of keeping menthol cigarettes on the market. I believe that you did not, but that's because the research shows over and over, both with combustible traditional cigarettes and certainly now with e-cigarettes, the flavors initiate youth into tobacco use. And that's why we're trying to fight laws, and we are helping pass laws across the United States. And we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So our model is grassroots advocacy. And what there has never been in this country an organized parent voice to fight against the predatory behavior of the tobacco industry. What do we know around the world about the tobacco industry? They need to replace their customers. They go after youth as a vulnerable community. They go after what is called priority communities. Here in America, we know they've used flavors like menthol to go after communities of color, specifically African-American smokers. This is what the industry does. And so as the first and only parent voice at the table, we have proven the proposition that parents must be part of the conversation, part of the activation, the education, and the fight. Some of the core tenets, it says tenants, I apologize, that is a typo. Tenets, T-E-N-E-T-S, sorry about that. Some of the core tenets of our advocacy include empowering parents to share their stories to affect change. Partnering with regional groups and local elected officials. We do town halls, rallies, we attend hearings, and we build a database of personal stories to share. Here on the right on my screen, we see a wonderful mom of 6 kids from California, Diane Moore, who was very involved in the fight to end flavored tobacco products in Los Angeles. And she says, and she's holding her youngest son under her arm, "We had no idea about nicotine addiction. My son started to become very angry, sad, and defiant. We started testing him for nicotine. He would test negative during vacation, but as soon as he returned to school, he would be positive." And that's the kind of story we receive. I mean, from the very day we launched our website, in the fall, the day that school started here in America, for most people in 2018, we were flooded with emails and letters from parents who were just desperate. They didn't know what these products were. The Juul, at the time, it was just Juul, and they were just looking for help. And we could go to the next slide. So I will give, I know that the numbers are perhaps slightly different. So these are United States figures. In our country, we look at the gold standard of research is the National Youth Tobacco Survey, the NYTS. And many of you may know that. I apologize if I'm saying things you already know. These are put out by the federal government, the CDC and FDA. And the most recent figures, which are likely already outdated, look at 2023. So there are over 2.1 million high school and middle school students who are vaping on a regular basis. That's more than 1 in 4 of those kids are using e-cigarettes daily. We see a slight decrease over last year in high school use. That's great, but we see an increase in middle school use. We also know that almost 90% of those youth are using flavored e-cigarettes. So again, flavors hook kids. Old news, the same news. That's why flavors must be taken out of the picture, because that is what is hooking our kids. A slight increase in middle school shows that there is initiation among younger kids. That's troubling to us. And the fact that more than 1 in 4 of those 2.1 million kids are using e-cigarettes daily suggests great level of addiction, nicotine addiction, and that concerns us. Additionally, the CDC reports that more than 10% of young adults ages 18 to 24 are also using e-cigarettes regularly. Now, I know from talking to Carolina that I think she said that you have about 6%, about 2 million of young people 18 to 24. Keep in mind, here in the United States, the legal age to buy tobacco products is now 21. So we have 2.1 million middle and high school students who are vaping regularly. Then we have 10% of young adults, but the youth who are between 18 and 20 are technically minors. So we have many millions of kids, of young people beneath the legal age to buy tobacco products who are doing this. It's extremely concerning. We can go to the next slide. So I'm sure that this will not surprise many of you. You are professionals. And I'll just say, one of the things when we started this group, we 3 moms, and we have over the last 5.5, almost it'll be 6 years in the fall, while we remain volunteers and while our organization is powered by parent volunteers, we have built out a professional organization that does education and advocacy. We do our education in Spanish and English, and sometimes in sign language and ASL, but we have a small but mighty professional team. So these are in English, but I don't think this will be very surprising to you that these products, starting with Juul and moving on, the one that says the perfect mix is Puff Bar. I'm sure you're familiar with Elf Bar. These products were meant to attract young people. That's what Juul did, and that's what all of the bad actors that have followed Juul have continued to do. They are not looking to hook adults, parents. Yes, there are certainly parents using these products, but remember, this is an industry that kills its customers with its poison. People die from lung cancer from cigarettes. We've known that for a long time. This is a reincarnation to initiate a new generation of nicotine addicts who will be lifetime customers. And our message as parents here, and I know those of you who are professionals, some of you may or may not be parents, you don't have to be a parent to want to protect children in a society, but we won't let the industry take another generation of children. That is what motivates all of us. So these are some of the examples of youth marketing, and we could go to the next slide. We wrote this Step Up to the Bar. These are some of the most popular products. And again, I would suspect that despite the regulations that you are lucky enough to have, remember, here in the United States, we do not have a cap on nicotine content in e-cigarettes. Everywhere else in the country does. And that may be one of the reasons why we have had an enormous problem here sooner than other places. There's no cap on nicotine. These products, as I know that all of you know, are using the new industry standard that was patented by Juul, that is nicotine salt technology that delivers enormous amounts of nicotine. You guys have a cap on nicotine. We do not. But these products deliver enormous amounts of nicotine in kid-friendly flavors, in stealth by design, tech chic products that are easy to conceal. And these are some of the most popular. Juul was the product that changed the game for the next generation. I like to say, and I'll say it slowly, I hope, they opened the public health Pandora's box and created this new problem, right? Big Tobacco 2.0. Here in the United States, we believe that our FDA's repeated delays and loopholes and failures to enforce existing regulations and failure to complete the regulatory process that we're still going through, even though they have repeatedly ignored federal court ordered deadlines to finish the regulation process, that has allowed that Pandora's box to remain open for new products, particularly disposable products from China, to flood in through our borders. And we may never, God forbid, be able to close that box. That's what keeps us all up at night, I'm sure. Here are some of the most popular new products. Again, these are disposable products from China. We know from our 2023 National Youth Tobacco Survey that Elf Bar, you see here on my left, is the most popular brand with youth. There's also Air Bar, there's Puff Bar, there are things like Hail Mary and Miley Mini, and many other products. The point of this is these products are highly addictive. And even in a place like Brazil, which has such tight regulations, which we are jealous of in some ways because we don't, the failure to, and even if you have strict regulations, unless you enforce them, unless you educate parents to protect their kids, unless you have parents who educate others and elevate to the authorities and elected officials the fact that there's not strict enough enforcement of the laws, then this problem will continue. And we can go to the next slide. I want to point out briefly, here in the US, there's been a lot of talk recently about the Zyn generation. As you may know, Zyn and companies like On and Velo, these are the flavored nicotine pouches. We heard about these years ago and reported them to our FDA years ago because these were products that kids were using, especially after they realized that, thanks to groups like ours and our many partners, that teachers at school were suddenly getting hip to seeing people like this, thinking that that was a cap from your phone and not a jewel cap or this. So these young people, if they were playing on a sports team, if you're highly addicted to nicotine, you need more and more nicotine to keep your buzz going. If you play on a team and you don't want to get thrown off the team because you're breaking the rules, you can hold a nicotine pouch in your mouth and no one will know. And these have become enormously popular among young adults and among teens. And these are products here. You can see Lucy. It looks like a mint. I mean, these are clearly being marketed to kids. And again, we do not advocate about tobacco flavored. In the Zyn picture, one of them, it may be a tobacco flavor. We're just focused on the kids and the flavors. And so we don't think any of these products that are clearly being marketed to kids because of their cartoon looks, you can see the pink one, should be available. We can go to the next slide, please. So I know that this is a professional group. Some of you may be parents, some of you maybe not, but you're all passionate and I'm sure you understand. But just to very quickly, and this will also give you a sense of how we educate parents. These are slides that are taken from our core parent presentation. So please bear with me. Again, we teach people how does vaping affect the adolescent brain. The adolescent brain, as you know, is highly susceptible to addiction. Vaping, nicotine can cause mood disorders. It can worsen your anxiety or depression. It reprograms the prefrontal cortex, the reward center, for further addiction. That's why we have heard nicotine can often, or has in the past, been referred to, and we're not scientists or researchers, though all of our slides are signed off on by our board members who are scientists and researchers, but nicotine they consider a gateway drug, because so many of the young people who have become addicted to nicotine vapes have now moved on to other products. We see elevated levels of co-use in this cohort of nicotine-flavored vapes and marijuana vapes. And we certainly know that marijuana, especially today when it is much more potent than back in the day when people my age were young, that is not good for the developing brain. Nicotine can cause permanent cognitive change. It can worsen your memory, your processing speed, and again, it can serve as a gateway to other drugs. And we can go to the next slide. And again, I think there are just 3 slides that look at the how does vaping nicotine affect the lungs? Remember, and I know you all know this more than I, that your lungs develop until you are, I think, or your brain develops till about 25, and I believe your lungs until 25 or 26. Vaping aerosols in e-cigarettes, the propylene glycol is the base, and then there are the flavorants. They contain heavy metals, ultrafine particulates, and chemicals that when you suck them very, very deep into your lungs at very, very high heat, and you can see we have the footnotes so you can look at the research. I don't know what que perigo means, but marijuana vapes, ! Que perigo. I think I know what that person is referring to because we feel the same way. Although we do not take a position on the legalization of marijuana, but we are certainly aware, and many parents are concerned about this. It is very serious. Is that what that says? Isto é muito grave. It's very serious. I think I might have understood that, and I agree. But anyway, getting back to the vaping of nicotine. But by the way, if you are vaping marijuana or you're vaping nicotine, these devices degrade over time. So leaving aside the nicotine and the marijuana and the flavorants and all of the chemicals that are toxic at high heat, and many of those chemicals combine with other chemicals in the flavorants. We don't even know what they are, creating third toxic chemicals that we're not even aware of. But the metals can really impact and irritate the cilia, the fine, hairy lining of your lungs. There's a potential for allergies to nickel or other metals. There can be a worsening of asthma and chronic lung disease. I don't know if this will translate. I suspect it will with this crowd, but EVALI, that's e-cigarette vaping, EVALI, associated lung disease, was something that our CDC was following very closely in 2019 on a weekly basis up until March of 2020 when it was COVID and everything shut down. While the majority of these EVALI lung illnesses were caused by vitamin E acetate, a thickening agent in marijuana, there were at least 12% of the 2,000 plus cases that were very serious that were young people only using nicotine. And according to an article in Nature that was part of the Medscape, I don't know how this translates, but it's been reported here that there may have been as many as 30,000 cases of EVALI, which is a blanket term, meaning of cases of mostly young people who ended up having some kind of lung injury that were recorded at hospitals around the country. So we can go to the next slide. How does vaping affect the heart? Again, I believe you know this. Nicotine is a stimulant. It restricts blood flow. It can increase blood pressure, adrenaline, heart rate, cardiovascular disease. These flavor chemicals are toxic to heart cells. And research shows that flavored e-cigs have led to cardiac arrest and arrhythmia in mice. Okay, that's an animal study. I think the best way to say it is nothing good can come from a young person vaping anything. The only thing that should go into a young person's lungs, much less anyone's lungs, but we're focused on kids, is air. Only air should be going into those precious developing lungs. And these products are not safe for our children. We could go to the next slide. And I'm leaving it to Carolina to give me a time check. I don't want to run out of time. Additional risks. I'll read this a little more quickly. These have all been reported in research. DNA damage to oral. Am I good for time?
No, don't worry. It's okay. Perfect, okay? Feel at home.
Okay, I do. Especially when I realized I understood very serious. I was very proud of myself. Okay.
Yeah.
DNA damage to oral epithelial cells. That means that the nicotine can get through the blood barrier. I don't know what the expression is, but it can get through the blood barrier into your bloodstream, weakened immune system. The FDA is still investigating, though the industry says it stopped, but you can go on the FDA website, seizures from nicotine poisoning. The kids refer to being nic sick, gastro issues, and huge weight loss. The negative impact on the mouth microbiome and oral disease, prediabetes, high blood sugar. And there were studies both out of Stanford from one of our board members, and then later other studies after that was received criticism. But it is true. There have been more studies that show that youth who vape have been more likely to get COVID-19 and to have more severe symptoms of COVID-19. And we could go to the next slide. So why do teens vape? So again, the most important thing, and I believe you would all know this, is flavors. Here in the US, among high schoolers, as we said earlier, 90% use flavored products. 18% of those are using flavored products that are menthol. And one of the things we fought for, because the FDA and our partners see us as the quote, boots on the ground. I don't know if that would translate, meaning we hear from parents every single day. We have parents whose kids are addicted. I've had kids, my own kids, using these products. There's no, we have no shame about admitting that, right? The industry deliberately targeted our kids. We know that there are new products that are very prevalent, whether it's in Brazil in the black market, but certainly here, they are called iced products. Iced products are mentholated products. And it is not until this year that the FDA, in its National Youth Tobacco Survey, after we pushed and pushed, asked, are you using an iced flavor? These products are targeted to youth. They are very accessible, affordable, discreetly shared, shipped, and delivered. And we could go to the next slide for more reasons. There's, here in the US, there is, so this is about a shift because of Juul. There was almost overnight a shift in social norms. Every parent in any culture, in any country, in every language hears, but mom, dad, or, grandma, grandpa, whoever your guardian is, quote, everyone is doing it. Now, that's never true. But when at the peak here, we had 1 in 4 kids who were vaping. So our goal is to help the 1 who was and empower the 3 who weren't to keep saying no. There's other reasons: heightened stress, anxiety, and depression. This is a very scary time. I think COVID had an impact on the world and created more anxiety for young people who are already living in a stressful time. There is, increase in substance use. There's a connection between mental health and self-medication. A lot of kids described liking the head rush from this enormous nicotine kick. These products are extremely addictive, particularly here in this country where we do not, and we should, and we fight for a cap on the levels of nicotine. And of course, there was a perceived lower risk. At the very beginning, when Juul came on the scene, there was a lot of research that showed that kids just thought it was, quote, tasteful, water vapor with flavor. Even today, some kids report the same. And the industry is constantly communicating the message that these are safer products. Now, there's no long-term evidence that these are, quote, safer. But what we do know from research here, at least, is that when kids hear safer, they understand safe. They don't have the same, maturity, intellectual maturity and development to understand that something is safer doesn't mean it is safe. We could go to the next slide, please. So here's what we hear. If I could only say this in Portuguese, I would, because I don't think it would be very different. What we hear from kids, and I'll just read some of these stories. Jackie told us, there was one period where I quit vaping for 8 months, but one day I was around my friends and I smelled their vapes and I did an immediate 360. It feels like an endless loop because vaping has such a strong grip on my life. I wish I had never started. By the way, I can't tell you how many times we hear these beautiful young people who are in the grips of addiction, and we hope more and more coming out of it, although there is still no FDA-approved treatment for youth addiction to nicotine vapes, sadly. We need more focus on research dollars to find a solution and more resources. But these kids say, I wish I could go back in time and tell my younger self, don't start. And I find that so tragic. Alex told us, he's now in his 20s, actually. When I first started, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety in my life. Vaping was a way to help take away my stress and ease my growing anxiety and other things that were stressing me out at school. Now, I know that you all as professionals know it's a vicious cycle. Some of these kids, as in this case, are using vapes to alleviate anxiety, and then they get that hit. And in that moment, they feel more calm because they've gotten the hit that they need because they've dropped, right? Their nicotine level has dropped, creating more anxiety. And so over time, you need more and more and more. The addiction gets greater and greater. It's a vicious cycle. And that's incredibly painful for us as parents to see. I will tell you that in the case of Alex, partnering with his mother, who's a fantastic advocate in the state of Florida, he has been able finally to kick the habit, and we're really proud of him. We can go to the next slide. What are the signs? So this is really hard. And this was something that we learned ourselves. Here are some good ones. A secretive attitude, a closed door, frequent excuses to use the restroom or go outside. Now, anyone who's around a teenager could say, well, every teen has a secretive attitude or a closed door. I mean, my youngest is 16. Her door is constantly slammed in my face. But these are things that you notice very intensely that you didn't see before. It's all about a change in behavior. The sweet smell, my partner, Dorian Furman, my co-founder, she spoke very openly when we started 5 years ago about the addiction of her son, Philip, who was then 14, which was very brave because no one would speak about it at the time. And I will always be grateful to her and to her son, her family for that. She thought maybe her son had a girlfriend. He would come home from a party and she would smell something sweet on him, but it was, I think it was Mango Jewel at the time. A use of candles or room freshener to disguise the smell. My own son, now 22, he asked me for a diffuser. And I thought, oh, he's so spiritual. He wants to meditate. But no, he wanted to cover the smell of his friends, and he were using vapes. Dry mucous membranes from the propylene glycol. It's called PGVG. I don't know how to translate it, but those are the e-cigarette liquids, whether they have nicotine or not. PGVG, propylene glycol, and vegetable glycerin, which, by the way, one of the complications from a regulatory standpoint in this country, those are considered safe for example, in food, but they are not safe to be ingested at high heat. But propylene glycol dries out the mucous membranes of your nose, your throat, your mouth. That's why you hear a terrible hacking cough. That's why you see sudden nosebleeds. You might find unusual items like colorful plastic caps or USB drives or highlighters or pens. I don't have one in front of me, but they look like they are made, again, they're stealth by design. They are made to look like school supplies. That's how insidious these companies are. And we can go to the next slide for the next 6 reasons, I think. A change in sleeping pattern. I mentioned a raspy cough, constant lung infections, chest pain, a shortness of breath, pneumonia, a heightened caffeine sensitivity or a jitteriness. I sometimes laugh saying this one: anxiety, irritability, mood swings, anger. Again, this describes a teen. It probably describes me as a middle-aged woman, but really it's about the intensity and a shift in behavior that doesn't seem to fit with who that child was before. A change in eating habit, nausea, I mentioned, Nick sick. Again, unknown or increased spending or deliveries. And we can go to the next slide. Here's what parents are telling us. and this is so sad. This is from Faiza, a volunteer. I don't recognize this kid who was a good athlete and soccer player. He's a stranger in my house. He started disappearing more and more and became a different person. It was hard to watch. Kelly, another one of our volunteers, I saw vaping change who he was. The vape wall went up and I could not tear it down. You feel defeated. You do everything as a parent to keep your child safe, but we're not with them 24/7. And they're able to get these products very easily. And that's on the vape companies. And I think in speaking earlier, I think, that's probably true in Brazil as it is here. And that's why we need parents to understand. And we need parents to not to enforce the laws, but to elevate the issues around a lack of enforcement. We can go to the next slide. So people always ask us, how do I talk to my child about vaping? How and when? And we say, prep for the conversation. It is a very rare child, certainly not one of my children. If you say to a child, are you vaping? I mean, maybe someone will say, yes, I've been waiting for you to ask me. And the truth is, sometimes these kids are so desperate to ask for help and they want you to ask them. But most kids will say, no, but I found a vape in your knapsack. Oh, that belongs to a friend. That's pretty much how it goes. So it's not, it's about doing your homework. We recommend, and by the way, while we don't yet have our materials and our resources or our website in Portuguese, we do have information available in Spanish. We do have a whole Spanish track, and this presentation can also be given in Spanish, but I apologize that I cannot give it in Spanish, and definitely not yet. We don't have enough funding to also do it in Portuguese. We're hoping that you guys will want to be trained with us and you can be giving it sometime in Portuguese in your own communities. But you need to go on our website, parentsagainst-vaping.org. We think it's really important that parents understand the landscape, know what the products are. You all are professionals, but we need to teach parents. This is what's happening. One of the approaches we say is you don't want to talk at your kids. You want to talk with them. Ask questions and then really listen to the answer. Instead of saying, are you vaping? Do your friends vape? You can say, look, I attended a lecture, or I hear there's a lot of vaping. When you go to a party, do you find a lot of kids are vaping, or are you concerned if you go to the school bathroom? Do you see kids vaping, or do you want to ask me any questions? I've done some research. I know it may be hard. And you really want to make it clear to kids, we're talking about addiction. And while we certainly believe there must be rules and consequences in parenting overall, we don't believe in punishing children for addiction. And we certainly don't believe in punishing children for an addiction that was forced upon them by a predatory industry. We and our partners support alternatives to suspension with the schools. We think it's really important, both within the home and as a parent with your school community, to partner with your child. If a child knows that they can come to you and ask for help, they are more likely to come to you when they need you. Again, it doesn't mean that we don't believe in rules and consequences, but addiction is an illness, and we're talking about predatory companies. So it's really important to be clear that you disapprove of vaping, that you don't accuse. Shaming and blaming can create distance between you and your child, and that is the last thing you want. You can go to the next slide, please. Again, talk with them, listen, be an advocate. Obviously, modeling behavior. The most important thing any parent can do is do not smoke or vape, certainly not in front of your child, right? We don't want to tell adults what to do, but don't do that in front of your child. Practice role play resistance skills. If you're lucky enough to have a child who's not engaging in that behavior, maybe you say to them, okay, you're in the bathroom or you're at a party and everyone is vaping and you're offered a vape. What would you say? What we have found is a lot of kids say, I'm going to tell them that you said you would take away my privileges if I ever vaped, or you're going to take away my phone. I mean, sometimes they just want an excuse to say no. You also want them to feel that they can talk to other trusted adults. We have a lot of people who found there were adults at the school that they knew were open to partnering with their kids. I remember a single mom in the state of Maryland who had a trusted adult friend in her church, and she encouraged her son to speak with him if he wanted to talk about his issues around this subject. You certainly want to talk with your doctor, your family pediatrician, or local addiction specialists, and use quit resources. We have a bunch, which I'll get to on our website. Go easy on yourself. It is not your fault if your child is vaping. Lots of people target us online and say it's all about, quote, bad parenting. And we say, no, it's about bad companies preying on children. We have a private online support group on Facebook you can look for on our Facebook, Parents Against Vaping. We actually are very protective of our parents. So it only has about 700 parents. We could have 3 times that, but we're really careful to keep out people that we think are judgmental or from the industry. And we can go to the next slide. We have an educator toolkit that we use. Again, you can see it's in Spanish and English. I'm sorry if you heard the dog barking. Again, our aim is to empower parents to educate others in their own communities. And we have so many public health professionals who have come to us who are trained in our materials because it helps them engage parents in the communities in which they work. So, we're very grateful for the partners, the partnership, and our job really is to elevate what we call the heavy lifting that public health professionals have been doing against tobacco for decades. And we see our goal as elevating the voices of public health and humanizing the issues around vaping and the problems, youth vaping crisis, through our parent stories. So our digital toolkit has a virtual orientation and handouts. It's for parents, clinicians, school nurses, social workers, prevention specialists, and the training we think is really important to keep spreading the word. And we can go to the next slide. Then there are resources. I don't know much about how many resources are available in Brazil. I would suspect that there are many because you have always been very strong on enforcing these issues, but we tell people, talk with your pediatrician, your local experts. Doctors in this country have to prescribe nicotine replacement therapies, NRTs. Again, I mentioned though that there are no FDA approved tobacco cessation plans for youth and e-cigarettes, but we do know a lot of, there is research just coming out now about adults and using things like Varenicline, generic Chantix, et cetera. It's really interesting and really difficult. Relapsing is normal. It is particularly difficult for young people because, again, their prefrontal cortex continues to develop. And so much of this, it was in one of the quotes. I know this from one of my own children. If you have been able to have the strength, either using, patches or therapy or whatever has worked for you, to finally quit, and then you go, let's say, in the case of one of my kids, to a college party where so many people are vaping. Once your nicotine receptors in your brain are activated, that never goes away. So if you're a young person and you're around a cohort that is vaping, even if you've stopped, you are so much more likely to relapse. I mean, especially when your brain continues to develop, it's really hard. And it takes many attempts to quit nicotine. 2 of the resources that we point to, one is from our great partner, the Truth Initiative, and they have a great science-backed text app. I have to be honest, I don't know if it is in Spanish and English. I know it's in English. I apologize. I should have known beforehand. It's called This Is Quitting. We always recommend there's a parent track and a kids track, teen track. You can go online to truthinitiative.org/thisisquitting. If you have a phone, it's 1-800-DITCH-VAPE. And then also here In the US, we have smokefree.gov, and we have other resources from the CDC, et cetera, on our website. And we could go to the next slide. I think the key really is to support your child. They're not going to be able to quit on their own. They have to know they can trust you. You have to make it clear. If you have a problem, we will solve it together. We see that even with kids in their 20s. I'll just very briefly go through. This is one of our signature programs. It's called, the acronym is POISON, Parents Opposing Illegal Sales of Nicotine. We piloted this most recently in New York City. While we were able to help change the laws here in New York City, where I'm based, on flavored vapes, we found there was a terrible lack of enforcement. So we educated parents, and we gave them a Google form on their phone to take pictures of illegal products, which we then reported for them. Again, I know that you have this same issue. These products get to our kids no matter what we do. And we feel that it is a really important role for parents and other adult stakeholders to play in elevating that issue to fight for better enforcement. We can go to the next slide. One program that I think may really resonate, I hope, for you is, and many of you will know that the World Health Organization has been very focused on something that we've been doing for years, which is the environmental issue. This is the one youth-focused program that we created. We have focused on parents. We are not professionals at speaking to kids, but we speak to parents. However, so many parents came to us and said, my kid doesn't care when I say that vaping is bad for their lungs, that it's bad for their brain. They don't care. Well, you know what young people do care about, and in fact, we should all care about, is the impact that these products are having on our global environment. And again, this is something the WHO has been talking a lot about of late as well. And we created a program called Vapes Are Trash that is targeting youth through social media. This one is Vapes Are Trash in New York City. It exposes the human and environmental impacts of e-cigs and the tobacco industry to help change the perceived social norms and engage youth on a topic about which they are very engaged, and hopefully explaining the terrible consequences of these single-use disposable plastic vapes and the lithium-ion batteries, and the fact that liquid nicotine is, in this country, it's an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency hazard, that it's, destructive to the water, to animals. There's, child labor on farms, et cetera, tobacco farms. We hope this encourages youth to become advocates. We think this is a great program to target them, not to target kids with, but to counter the targeting of youth of those products. Go to the next slide, please. And finally, I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank Carol Costa Carolina for inviting me. I'm really honored. We would be so happy to continue the conversation, to be in touch. Please follow us on Instagram, on X, formerly known as Twitter, on Facebook. You can reach us at info@parentsagainstVaping.org. And I hope that we can partner and do amazing things together. I hope to come and visit you all in person someday. And I hope that anyone who's coming our way will let us know, and we can meet like-minded public health advocates and activists in person. And thank you so much again for your time.
Such an inspiring action, Meredith. Thank you so much for your speech. Now I'm going to read the lots of questions that we have here.
I apologize. I'm about to lose power, so you're going to see me dive down like a true
problem.
To make sure
no problem. Do yourself at home.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here we go. Well, that was my circus act. Sorry. Okay.
No problem. We are real. We are real mothers.
Not even working. I know, right?
First question is from Luis Guilherme. He wonders if there are any similarities to Narcotic Anonymous for parents and friends with PAVe. Do you know? I don't know how to translate
No, I understand. I would say, and I think I know what he's referring to, that's what our parent support group is for. Meaning that is a place where parents can come together in a safe space and be very open with each other. They can share their fears. They can ask others what is working. So I think, looking for a community of people who are struggling with their kids' addiction, that would be the closest I think that we have right now. Does that probably answer? I hope that might answer the question.
Thank you. Sure. A gente vai, depois da gravação, a gente vai legendar. We're going to get subtitles after the recording of the broadcast. And we will go to Reels too, to, have subtitles and get things clearer. But everyone is very thankful and complimenting a lot your work, Meredith, together with the other moms and all the net that you constructed. Another question is Guilherme. It's our activist. It's very active against tobacco industry. The industry is trying to how can I say, to dismantle what Anvisa, that is our FDA, did to push back the epidemic of vapes in Brazil. And they try to, there's no control and everything. And they try to let things on retail markets for, under the law. And we see, like World Health Organization sees, that prohibition as soon as possible is better when we compare our situation to other countries that
like ours. You have a cap on nicotine. You do not have menthol cigarettes, correct?
Yeah, the industry twisted the thing, and the existing products have menthol nicotine, but not new ones. Right. We got, whoa, we managed something that we got so happy about, and then the industry got there, and no, it's free market. And
so the free market problem, we have the same problem. I was at a meeting back in 2019 with then President Trump in the White House, and there were all the heads of the tobacco companies and the public health groups. And as I'm sure you know, public health groups do not meet with tobacco companies. This was a big deal. And people started screaming and yelling about, personal rights. So I think a few things. I think the tobacco industry, I'm speaking for myself because I don't have a 20-year history. I've only been doing this, and through no fault of my own, I consider myself an accidental public health activist. I did not plan on this, but I've learned a lot. And what I realized, especially as a journalist, having been a journalist, and more importantly, as a mother of 4, you know what it is when kids are fighting and screaming at the same time, which is we should, as a community, they're thinking 20 years ahead of us. The tobacco industry functions like an evil genius, like a multi-headed hydra, like we call it the Loch Ness monster. And they go back down into the garbage and the muck where they belong. And then they come back up with a facelift as if they're somebody new. We have to be thinking ahead. That's why we are very focused on putting all of the new products. The minute we hear about them, we are reporting them. We're putting them on our websites. They're already thinking about IQOS. I don't know how much you guys are thinking about IQOS. The industry, I'm not sure this is right on point, but I think what this is, the question or the comment is about, we have to think the way they think. The tobacco industry has had the nerve to try and reinvent itself as a smoke-free environment.
Mm-hmm.
They are trying to claim last year, the day before the day of maybe World No Tobacco Day, the CEO, whose name I can now not remember, of Philip Morris International, was on the front page of the Financial Times saying that their goal for Philip Morris International was to become what we call an ESG company, environmental social governance, because they are now smoke-free. And I will not make an obscene gesture to embarrass you, Carolina, because you were so kind to invite me, but I believe that everyone here knows a leopard does not change its spots. There is no way that the tobacco we are too smart to let them outsmart us. And that's why we think that the parent voice and educating and activating parents who are volunteers, right? Activating parents is, I think, one of the most powerful ways that we can show the mendacity, the predatory nature, the utter despicable behavior of an industry that seeks to addict young people to poison and keep them as lifetime customers. So it's really important that as public health professionals and as parents, as activists, that we try to keep ahead, because they are way ahead of us and we have to outsmart them at their game. They may have more money, but we have always said as a parent group, there is no amount of money that the tobacco industry could ever spend that could drown out the authentic voice of a volunteer parent who is speaking out to protect not only their own child from the tobacco industry, but everyone else's children. So to the extent that I think public health groups in different countries can try to activate and empower parents to come forward, I think the better, because they can't fight that.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So Guilherme also asks, are there any recorded cases of vape batteries exploding?
Oh, yes. I don't have a number in front of me, but I can tell you, I actually just last week or 2 weeks ago, I testified about flavored vapes with PGVG without nicotine, but I testified about that before what we have here, the Consumer Product Safety Commission. We're concerned, for example, a little off topic, that the industry is now using nicotine analogs. They're trying to get away with saying, our FDA has authority over nicotine and only recently over synthetic nicotine. But now we see the industry is using new products that they are patenting, things called Meredith that are in products like Spree Bar that FDA has no control over. So we've gone to the Consumer Product Safety Commission to say they should take a look at that. I bring that up because the Consumer Product Safety Commission has done a lot of work about lithium ion batteries that are coming from China. So yes, I can't tell you the numbers, but if you just Google, you will see there are lots of lawsuits about that and things like that happen on airplanes. It is a problem. It is not the biggest problem, but it is a problem. And again,
serious problem.
A serious problem, absolutely. And you could Google to see how often that has happened in Brazil, how often it has happened. I know that there is tracking of that.
And they don't used to pay. They don't like to pay for the evil they provoke. So Guilherme is asking again, are there class actions trying to ask for reimburse or
yes.
money?
Yes. And if there's interest in Brazil, I will tell you that we're very, very proud that we never participated in any of the private lawsuits. Again, we didn't want to receive payment. We felt that would compromise us. We wouldn't be able to speak freely. But we did provide parents for many of, I don't know how your legal system works, but here, every one of the 50 states has a state attorney general. And so there were, dozens and dozens and dozens of class action lawsuits, but each state brought a lawsuit. We are in New York City. In New York State, we testified, and our boys, our sons, testified about Juul coming into our school. We testified about that at FDA. We testified about it in the US Congress. We testified about it for those lawsuits. And most of the huge settlements referred to our congressional testimony. So yes, again, there have been enormous lawsuits filed against Juul. It is still being figured out. Some of our parents tragically, thankfully, not so many have lost children, but we do have people who lost children. We do have multiple people whose children have had, lung transplants, have needed other kinds of transplants, have really suffered enormous consequences. So there are many lawsuits. And again, I think we have a lot of information about that on our website. I would encourage you to see what are legal channels that parents and the public health community can use to go against companies, especially Juul, which did so much harm. And they started this youth vaping epidemic. They are not the only bad actors, but we focus on them because that was our origin story.
Yeah, PAVe needs to pave our way in Brazil. Help us to pave our way through that, because it's so important. We learn from each other experience, right? And that's amazing, because it's the only thing we have. I call them Thanos from Marvel. I don't know if you are aware of that, but Thanos wants to kill half of the world and the galaxy. And it's basically what the industry does, like 1 in 2.
Right, that's what they do. That's what they do. And that's the whole thing. We will not, we as a society were duped before, right? We didn't understand, but the industry did, that smoking causes cancer and would kill you. When I was young, we knew smoking would cause cancer and it was bad for you. And we don't have time to wait, God forbid, in 10 or 20 years to see for the research. We don't want this generation of children to be big tobacco's lifetime customers, nor do we want our children, I mean, all of ours from all across the world, to be science experiments for the e-cigarette experiment. We already know so much about the harms of these products. Again, we focus on the flavors and the kids. And so in terms of the personal freedoms, we don't speak about, with the exception of Juul, where we did say that our FDA should not approve tobacco flavor because we knew they came into our school. We had personal knowledge, but we focus on the flavors and the kids. Adults can make their own bad choices. Children do not have the mental acuity to understand. It is our job to protect them, and it's our job to educate them and to educate each other. Again, we seek to elevate the really important voices and the heavy lifting of the public health community, like yours and like ours here. And, it's one world. We're more interconnected than we've ever been, thankfully, in that way. So I agree with you that we have to share resources where we can. We have to empower and support each other because the industry just sees profit. They don't care if they're profiting off of some vulnerable person in Brazil or in New York City or anywhere in the world. So we have to come together and support each other, share resources, and tell them to take their filthy, blood-soaked, profiteering hands off our young people. What do I really think? I don't know.
Yeah, perfect. And Christina, one last question. And I think you said it all, but it's never bad to repeat, to let it clear how to protect children from tobacco and vape.
So that's the biggest question. And I think, here in this country, when we started this, we felt we had to educate parents so they would understand what we were facing. And we had to change the laws so that there would not be access to flavored vapes. That has been playing out for far too long. And while we work with our FDA and we consider them partners, these are people who have devoted their lives to public health, and we're grateful for that. We also are pushing them. they have let us down. They have allowed too much time to go by. And where, if in a case like Brazil, you have strong laws, I think we need to protect them by pointing out when enforcement is not working, pointing out when products are getting through to kids, making sure that that the authorities are policing the internet market. I mean, there are so many products being sold through TikTok, through all, we've testified at the Federal Trade Commission. So I think it's most important. I mean, on the micro level, as parents, the best thing we can do is educate ourselves and have open conversations with our kids, letting them know that we would not punish them for addiction. We would partner with them to help them if they need help. I think that's really, really important. It doesn't mean we don't believe in rules. It doesn't mean we don't believe in consequences, but it means that addiction is an illness. And in this case, we're talking about young people who have been targeted by predatory industry. So that's one. And number two, if you can fight, you're welcome. Can fight for the laws and fight to make sure the laws are enforced. So that's, and again, work together and have open communication. And I hope that this is just the beginning. I know that you have had my wonderful partner, friend, and mentor, Stan Glantz, has spoken to your group. I hope we can continue the communication and we can learn from you, and hopefully we can help you learn from us, and we can protect kids. Every child in this world deserves to be healthy and to be safe. And that's all that we want.
Meredith, we can't thank you enough. And we ended the May, our project without nicotine products, because they don't use tobacco anymore, right? They use nicotine as something that is better, and we know it's not. They are refraining. They have a facelift. Yeah, and we can't thank you enough. And there's no better way to end this month than with your own experience and your amazing work. And let me talk in Portuguese. A gente vai tentar traduzir as partes principais. Muito obrigada para quem ficou nessa live internacional. Vocês foram assim fundamentais para trazerem perguntas, né? Que, enfim, acho que só enriqueceu o nosso encontro. E muito obrigada, boa noite, bom descanso.